That evening, after the rainy outdoor cold gig, we are continuing with Chris Squire. Now, in 1980 when you guys split up, you continued and did Run with the Fox with Alan. Could you talk about the forming of cinema, how that came about?
The whole story?
Well, briefly, if you could.
Okay, yeah. Well, that's a good place to start.
You and Alan decided to form a band, and you were, jamming with Paige? So it's after Yes?
Yeah, that's a good place to start, where Alan and I did Run with the Fox, because that was at the end of 1981. Right, that's it, 1981. And as you kind of were saying before, previous in that year, Alan and I had been working with Jimmy Page, and I know all these XYZ rumours were kind of pretty strong over here, but what the reality of it was, for the record, is that Jimmy had moved to Windsor, which is fairly close to where I live, and he had bought Gus Dudgeon's studio, which was in a place called Cookham, which is also a local town, and he got in touch with me and said, shall we get together and do some things, because I want to find out what it's like in the studio that I've just bought. And so really that's what it was. It was Alan, myself and Jim just really trying out.
For?
Well, it wasn't so long. It was, and it wasn't every day. I mean, it was over a period of about 6 weeks to 2 months.
Did you record any of the stuff?
Yeah, well, they were mainly my songs, and I think we did about 4 songs, and I think one that I'd written with Alan. And it was, just trying out the ideas and work, and it was good doing the songs. But they never really got very much past a demo sort of stage, so there's not really any hidden sort of secret masters of XYZ. Yeah. So there we are.
So that's how the rumors came about.
Yeah.
So then what happened next? You and Alan continued, and Trevor was the next person?
Okay, well, then after that, then Alan and I were back working together and planning our next project. And we did, that Christmas to Run with the Fox single. And it wasn't a huge hit, but it got a lot of airplay in England, and sold a few records, and it was kind of like, it's been a year since we'd been on stage, so we were keeping our hand in, I guess. So, and then after that, we kind of said, okay, what are we going to do now? Are we going to carry on and do a kind of an album, which we could have done in a fairly Steely Dan type of fashion, where it was, would have sort of Alan and I doing it, and then getting in session guys to do the ideas and stuff like that, which was something we considered. And the other thing was, well, shall we put a band back together and work on that? And so we decided that was, the better of the two ideas. So then, we spent some time looking around for guitar players, and I'd been aware of Trevor for a couple of years, and he came to play with us, and it's a funny story really, because when he actually came to play with us, we all played really badly. But we knew that it was going to work. It was kind of like one of those odd things. We kind of none of us played that well, for the hour or so that we got together, and it wasn't particularly intelligent or anything, but we knew it would work.
You knew the chemistry was there?
Yeah, possibly even because of that. It was kind of like one of those oddball things. So, and then after that, after we'd worked for a bit, and then I realised that because of Trevor's kind of flamboyant kind of guitar playing, that Tony Kaye would be a good foil for Trevor as a keyboard player, because I wanted to get a keyboard player, and Tony being more of a textural player than a kind of a habitual kind of a flash type person. I realised there'd be a less competition, between guitar and keyboards that there can be sometimes, and and I thought it would make a good blend. And Tony came, and yes, it worked, and we spent all that year rehearsing, which was then 1982, and Trevor Horn came and heard us rehearsing a few times, and other producers from various parts of the world came in, and a lot of people wanted to produce the band. And the record company were growing more confident, as more and more people were attracted to it and wanted to do it. But then eventually, it turned out that, even though I didn't think it would be the case, that Trevor ended up producing it, which was also another odd thing, because he'd been working on pop things like Dollar and disco-orientated things like ABC, and had a lot of success doing that since he'd left the band, as a singer. Because really, his heart is in producing. That's his forte. And so we got together and we did the whole album, and we were going to be called Cinema, which was the name that I thought of, and then we got various other bands in the States, like four actually, all saying, "We're called Cinema and we're going to sue you." So we wrote back to them all and suggested that they should get in touch with each other and sue each other, because and we left the name kind of just open, while we carried on making the album. And then when we came, we'd done most of everything, and we finished most of the vocals and stuff, and there was a couple of tracks that we were a bit stuck on, and I suggested that John should maybe come and do some stuff on it. So I gave him a call, and he liked what he heard, and he came down and liked it, working on it. And we liked the thing is, he contributed, on some tracks it was lyrics, and other tracks it was a tune and lyrics and modified a few, so there's a combination of different influences from John throughout the album. And when we heard back the first couple of tracks that we were working on with John, they sounded real good, and we realised it was, we were going to have to call the band Yes again, because from that point onwards, every interviewer would be asking, but why aren't you called Yes anymore? Because and that would have been an awful question to keep answering. So there you are, and that was Yes, and here we are, back again.
That was great. Now,
yeah, it's 11 years, I think. I think Alan came in '73. Is that right? Am I right?
So it was right after Bill left.
Close to the age of his last album Bill played on. That was at 72, I think, wasn't it?
70.
And Topographic Oceans was 73, I think. I mean, you don't have to include this bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've been playing with Alan ever since he joined Topographic Oceans.
And you really haven't done much work apart from one another?
No, apart from a solo album separately, no, everything else. Well, I don't know, I think Alan's done a couple of things. But, no, everything's mainly been working on Yes projects, because, through the 70s, Yes were, touring extensively throughout the world. I think we did 17 tours of the States and all, and made like 12 albums and that. So it was a pretty busy kind of time. That's why we had the break. After the 1980 tour, Trevor Horn singing and Jeff Downes playing keyboards. After that point, although I wanted to go on and make a second album in that format, for various reasons it didn't happen. So, we had a break, and that was a good thing, because after all that concentrated work and output for over that period of years, it was necessary, and proved itself by coming back with 90125 and Owner of a Lonely Heart. So that was good.
Makes for an incredible rhythm section though. You guys like know each other, like you know exactly when you come back, like tonight when you're on stage.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, that's a lot of the beauty of being able to be live players in a way is being able to continue with people for a period of time. You know, it obviously depends what you do in that period, whether it be 5 years or 10. You know, if you can work twice as much in 5 years, and it can be maybe even more exciting than half as much in 10. But obviously, knowing the people you're playing with is kind of like an added pleasure that you know, lots of new bands these days haven't even got to the stage of discovering yet. You know, and which is in some ways, you know, not only just with Alan, but with you know, especially after we've been touring all this year, but with everyone else in the band, is something that is one of the reasons that makes it a pleasure for me to still to be able to go on the stage and play and enjoy a concert. You know, for the actual kind of just the interaction between the musicians. That makes it kind of like good for me. It's not just kind of like is one of the reasons that makes it a pleasure for me to still to be able to go on the stage and play and enjoy a concert. You know, for the actual kind of just the interaction between the musicians. That makes it kind of like good for me. It's not just kind of like I'm there to promote the last record, you know. It's because it's an exciting thing to do.
You can like peak as a band, like you know, get really tight, know your every move. That must be cool.
Yeah.
Do you find that you know you get progressively better as you play more often? I guess it's just
yeah. You have the occasional bad night, of course. You know, where things go wrong technically, and you know, and not everyone in the band is always just by, you know, a kind of a fact of life. Not everyone in the band will always be locked in perfectly with everyone every night, but you know, a lot of nights it is. That's the great thing about a band, really, is that nowhere in real life are there 5 people who work in a factory or something who really actually all get on and do something in sympathy. You know, so a lot of people come to see bands, you know, for the reason of like, because it's so strange to see people actually doing one thing all together in the same kind of spirit, and the most successful bands usually are successful because of that.
I never looked at it that way. Huh.
And that's why people become fans, because it draws them to you know, it's kind of that feeling more than what they're playing exactly. That feeling of you know, these people being together. I mean, you know, that is basically the key to the Stones' longevity, is that, you know, they've had a couple of changes, but not as many as Yes, and you know, the fact they are still there as adult people and doing this, you know, and still enjoying it, because you know, they certainly don't need the money.
Certainly. Now, when people go to a Yes concert, when you do your bass segment in the show, something happens with the PA system where the frequency gets so low it like makes this pounding in your heart. Could you briefly explain what happens there with the bass pedals?
Well, I think that's just, you're just talking about the sub bass monitors, you know, in the PA, which just deal with frequencies, you know, centered around the 30 and 40 cycle area, which is real low, and those speakers are just there for that purpose. And you know, they, during the course of the show, they're used in and out, you know, for kind of that low bass effect. So if you heard them all the time, it would probably make you sick. But you know, basically, you know, it's good to bring them in and out.
Okay. Do you think with the band this year, touring the 2 American tours, do you think the audience is comprised of hardcore Yes fans, or are you seeing a lot of new fans?
Your question is, I think that it's not hardcore fans from the past totally, or a new audience totally. I think it's still a blend of both. And it's an interesting fact, really, that on the first, return tour that we did at the beginning of this year, that you got a lot of the kind of older hardcore fans, maybe who bought the front row seats, and it might have been the guy and the girl who met at college and were really into Yes, and they ended up becoming married, and he's now an accountant, and she kind of is a housewife, or maybe works as well, and and it's kind of like, oh look, Yes are playing, and that's good. Oh, remember like when we were at college 10 years ago, and they're really fanatics, and they bought the front row seats, and they kind of came along and sat there, and then later on the kind of newer fans, not being so fanatical at that point, kind of would buy obviously seats more at the back, and then when we get more towards the encore stage and people kind of came forward to the front of the stage, it was kind of always amazing that there was this whole kind of like younger generation of people who kind of completely just ran over these people and swamped them, as they were raving away, and you could see them embarrassedly having to kind of like stand up and start sort of boogieing amongst the melee, And I always knew that when we came back to do the second tour, that they would be more kind of aware of that, if they were going to come back, that they might buy a seat a little further back where they could sit there with, do whatever they wanted and enjoy the show from a distance, and let the kind of the newer fans buy the front row seats who wanted to boogie more and stuff like that. And I've seen that change, yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. Newer fans get the front row seats.
Yeah, because it's kind of like these people thought they were going to go to the Yes concert that they enjoyed in 1975 when they all reverently sat there and thought that that's what it was going to be again, and of course it isn't quite the same. And so here we are. So the next thing that we're going to do before we start serious work on the next album is I think a 3-week tour of South America, mainly based around this festival that they're having in Rio, where a number of bands are playing, and we're going to do some other shows as well in local countries which are not totally defined at this point, or maybe we won't. It's a bit like that. So and then when we've done that, we'll be starting serious work on the next album.
Has the band ever been to South America?
No, never.
Huh.
Never. In fact, we sell a fair amount of records there, and have a kind of a large reputation. But we've never actually done there, never actually gone there.
Wow,
It takes a long time to negotiate the kind of the business side of touring South America. Really.
Okay.
Going to pay us in grass and stuff. Don't include that.
Do you guys obviously then have talked over what you intend to do on the next record? When do you expect to start doing that?
When do we intend to start doing our next record? Well, yeah, after the South American tour, that's in January, and yeah, it'll probably take the at least the first half of next year.
Is there any songs written for that?
Well, there's a concept for it, but I don't really want to go into it too much in detail at this point. Only that we're planning it to be a kind of an audio-visual sort of concept where the whole thing is kind of like filmic as well as music, and the writing of the music will kind of relate to the actual film as much as vice versa. Instead of having to kind of like do a song and then later on have to make a video with some kind of another concept from an outside director, and then you get this kind of thing. I'm thinking about the whole thing from the beginning, so that the kind of video concept is planned, so it's much easier, in fact, to do it. And so
there'll be a thread running through the whole album then?
Well, maybe not the whole album, but there will be kind of certain different tracks, and maybe one longer track that has a bit more of a detailed thing. But but trying to look at the whole thing as well as hear it.
Oh, that sounds great. I can't wait. Sounds like
Neither can I.
heavy art rock. Could you define the term art rock? Yes, is always
Well, I was playing Rock Pursuit on the airplane the other day. Some of the people in the art rock category are amazing. So I mean, I don't know if anyone could determine it.
No, didn't it come about? Isn't it kind of like an English thing? Because
I find it a fairly offensive title as it happens.
Okay. Isn't it an English thing though, because of the class system there?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't know who invented the term. I don't know. It's kind of like, what is art rock? What is art and what isn't? Who decides?
Yeah, I can see that point. When did you start playing the bass?
16.
When you were 16?
Yeah.
I read in the tour program that you started playing because you were too tall and everyone told you to take up the bass. Is that true?
No, in my early, the first time I got into playing bass, I just happened to be the tallest person in the band, so it was a natural thing to have the biggest guitar, Simple as that, really.
What was your first bass guitar, do you remember?
Yes, a Futurama.
Futurama?
Italian-made thing with a kind of a nice plastic blue, light blue finish and an awful sound. But mind you, the amplifier wasn't much either.
Did you just pick it up and start playing to records, or did you take lessons?
No, I didn't take lessons. Just listened to other people and went to watch other people, really, a lot.
What records did you listen to, and who did you go see?
Used to go to the Marquee Club a lot in London and watch The Who every week, and watch the Graham Bond organisation. That was the band that Jack Bruce played before Cream, and and lots of other people who played there. I used to go there most nights. And that's how I got my taste for live music. So I really kind of learnt my kind of my rock sort of dictionary more through live things than listening to radio, because in those days it was irrelevant what was on the radio in England.
Right. Did you practice a lot?
Yeah.
Lots of practice.
Doesn't it show?
Oh, it shows, yes. What records were you listening to? The same sort of thing?
Oh.
The Who?
No.
I guess they didn't have records out by then.
Well, no, not really. I don't think I ever bought any of their records because I used to see them so much.
Oh, God.
No, but I see them.
You play in kind of like a lead style every once in a while. You keep the rhythm of the band, but then the bass kicks out as the lead instrument, and that's very unique. Because most of the bass just kind of keeps time and is in the background, so to speak. But you have really pushed the bass into the forefront.
Well, that's my job.
No, how did that style develop? Where you know what I mean?
Well, I suppose because I used to go and see a lot of bands, and I'd see bass players, and then I'd see guitarists being very kind of like, like I'm the guitarist, and I kind of thought, well, maybe you can do that and play the bass as well, have the same attitude, I guess. I could never play guitar. My hands are too big for that. They are really, you could never play those little things,
Did you ever try?
Oh yeah, I mean I can play. I can play acoustic guitar, but I could never play sort of like, on a thing like that. It's too small.
So the bass is very much a lead instrument.
Well, it's become that way. I mean, I'm not saying that I kind of made it. There was a combination of people like John Entwistle, and myself, who kind of brought it to the forefront more. And then the progression goes on a long way into jazz rock and disco and everything, where the bass is often the loudest thing on the record.